Forge worlds are the backbone of the entire Imperium. Without them, there are no Titans, no tanks, no weapons, and no war. So today, we're breaking down every major Forge world in Warhammer 40K and everything that makes them terrifying, tragic, or both. Starting with one that no longer exists, Griffin 4. Griffin 4 is dead. Not damaged, not occupied, not under reconstruction, eaten. The entire planet was consumed by Tyranid Hive Fleet Leviathan, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. Before the swarm arrived, Griffin 4 was one of the most important Forge worlds in the Imperium. It housed the Legio Gryphonicus, a Titan legion whose god machines were among the most feared war engines humanity had ever built. Every single one of them gone, digested basically, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets really painful. Griffin 4 produced specialized weapons the Imperium desperately needed, the kind of output you literally cannot replace overnight. With the planet gone, that capacity simply vanished. Thousands of tech priests died alongside irreplaceable STC fragments and technological knowledge that existed nowhere else. The Mechanicus didn't just lose a world, they lost centuries of accumulated understanding that can never be recovered. Because it turns out when a billion Tyranids decide your planet looks like lunch, even the mightiest defenses in the galaxy amount to zero. No contingency plan survives contact with a hive fleet that eats the contingency, the plan, and the planet it was written on. But if Griffin 4's destruction left the Imperium scrambling, wait until you hear about the Forge world that was lost long before the Tyranids ever arrived. Tigris, one of the Imperium's most devastating anti-tank weapons, basically went out of production because of greenskins. Let that sink in for a second. Tigris, located in the Segmentum Ultima, was the birthplace of the Vanquisher cannon. This thing was the gold standard for punching holes through the enemy armor. If you were a tank commander facing down something big and angry, the Vanquisher was what you wanted bolted to your turret, and Tigris was the only world that designed it, built it, and perfected it. Then in the 35th millennium, Orc warlord Argard the Defiler showed up with a wah big enough to swallow the entire planet. Tigris fell, and the Orcs didn't just raid the place and leave, they stayed for several millennia, just squatting on one of the Imperium's most important weapons factories like it was a particularly nice garage. Here's where it gets frustrating. The STC data and manufacturing templates for the Vanquisher were lost with the planet. The Imperium couldn't replicate the process elsewhere because Tigris held the knowledge. Millennia of expertise just gone. And remember Griffin 4, with Tigris under Orc control and Griffin 4 later eaten by Tyranids, the entire Vanquisher production chain collapsed onto a single world, Styges 8. One weapon system, one surviving manufacturer. It's the most perfectly Imperial failure imaginable. Put all your eggs in 3 baskets, lose 2, then act surprised when things get difficult. But if you think losing a Forge world to Orcs is bad, wait until you see what Mordant has to deal with on a daily basis. Mordant Primo K. So after all the war, destruction, and existential dread, let's talk about something genuinely weird. Mordant Prime is a Forge world sitting in the Segmentum Obscurus, close enough to the Eye of Terror that the real estate value is basically negative and the neighbors are actively trying to murder you. But here's the thing, Mordant isn't cranking out tanks or Titans or plasma rifles. It's farming glowing bacteria. That's not a joke. The primary industrial output of this Forge world is the mining and cultivation of bioluminescent bacteria with specialized properties valuable to the Mechanicus. We're talking about organisms that get incorporated into systems requiring biological computational elements and advanced sensing technology. Basically, organic components fused with mechanical systems to create something neither fully alive nor fully machine, which is, not unsettling at all. And the Mechanicus guards the exact applications of these bacteria like they're nuclear launch codes. What specifically do they do with the glowing goop? Proprietary information. How does it interface with their tech? Classified. Why does it have to be bioluminescent? Nobody's telling you. Peak Adeptus Mechanicus behavior. We found magic bacteria and we're not sharing. The proximity to the Eye of Terror means Mordant needs a serious military garrison just to keep the lights on, which is ironic given that the lights are literally what they're harvesting. Every day is a balancing act between cultivating microorganisms and fending off Chaos warbands who presumably did not travel across the warp to steal yogurt cultures. But if Important sounds like an odd duck in the Forge World lineup. Wait until you hear about Vanaheim and its obsession with making everything just a little bit different. Vanaheim. Every Forge World we've talked about so far has a thing. Mars hoards knowledge. Riza worships plasma. Lucius teleports titans around like it's no big deal. Vanaheim's thing is a little different. Vanaheim is the kit basher of the Adeptus Mechanicus. This Forge World is notable for producing variant patterns of several common Imperial war machines, not inventing entirely new designs, not perfecting one specific technology until it becomes a religious experience. Just taking proven, battle-tested vehicles and going, yeah, but what if we moved the gun and added a different engine? Which, honestly, is kind of refreshing. Where Mars will spend 3,000 years debating whether a bolt should be rotated 2 degrees clockwise, Vanaheim is already in the workshop cranking out a modified Lehman Russ with a slightly different turret configuration, because some regiment on the eastern fringe asked nicely. They possess the technical expertise and industrial flexibility to develop alternative configurations tailored to specific tactical requirements, which sounds boring on paper but is actually incredibly useful when you're fighting a galaxy-wide war on every possible terrain type simultaneously. Now, the lore on Vanaheim is admittedly thin. Its exact location, production capacity, and detailed history aren't documented with the same obsessive detail as the big names. But here's the thing, the existence of Vanaheim pattern variants across multiple vehicle types confirms significant manufacturing infrastructure and serious technical know-how. You don't get your name stamped on Imperial war machines by accident. That's earned. Think of Vanaheim as the creative workshop of the Mechanicus. Less dogma, more duct tape and ingenuity. And speaking of Forge Worlds that have earned their reputation through sheer grit, let's talk about Metallica. Metallica. Yes, it's spelled with one L. Let's just get that out of the way now so nobody spends the entire section thinking about it instead of listening. Metallica sits in the Ultima Segmentum, which sounds fine until you realize what's next door, the Orc Empire of Charadon. One of the largest concentrations of greenskins in the entire galaxy, permanently angry, permanently looking for a fight, and Metallica is right on the doorstep, which is, not ideal. But here's the thing, Metallica doesn't just survive this arrangement, it thrives. The Forge world has been under near constant Xenos threat for millennia, and instead of crumbling, it built itself into one of the toughest industrial fortresses in the Imperium. Every factory line, every defensive protocol optimized for one thing, staying alive when a million orcs come knocking. And they always come knocking. Metallica is also home to Legio Metallica, the Iron Skulls, one of the major Titan legions in the galaxy. God machines the size of skyscrapers stomping across battlefields with distinctive heraldry blazing. The Iron Skulls were forged by the same constant pressure that defines everything about this world. When your backyard is an orc empire, your Titans learn to fight mean. Metallica's weapon output is highly valued across Imperial forces, distinguished by rugged reliability you'd expect from a world that developed everything under constant siege, the kind of pressure that either kills you or makes you dangerously good at what you do. Metallica chose the second option, repeatedly. The Imperium knows how precarious this location is. Lose Metallica and you lose a critical production center along with one of the most battle-hardened Titan legions in existence. Nobody wants that bill, but if Metallica sounds tough, wait until you hear about a Forge world that took the concept of quiet, steady production and turned it into an art form. Phaeton. Every Forge world we've talked about so far has some kind of catch. Rise is getting invaded. Metallica's neighbors with an orc empire. Graia got swarmed by a million greenskins. Phaeton? Phaeton is doing just fine. Thanks for asking. See, Phaeton sits in the Segmentum Solar. That's the same neighborhood as Terra and Mars, the most heavily defended, most strategically important slice of real estate in the entire galaxy. While other Forge worlds are getting shelled, besieged, and literally eaten by Tyranids, Phaeton is sitting behind the thickest defensive line humanity has ever constructed, casually tinkering with experimental manufacturing techniques, which is, not ideal for the Forge worlds doing all the dying. Here's the thing, proximity to Mars isn't just a safety blanket. It means direct coordination with the top of the Mechanicus hierarchy. Phaeton gets first wave technological updates, priority guidance on manufacturing targets, and the kind of institutional support that a Forge world like Agrippina can only dream about between artillery barrages. It's recognized as a notable Forge world with solid output capabilities, and it earned that reputation partly because it's never had to divert half its resources into not being destroyed. destroyed. And that's the quiet advantage nobody talks about. Safety breeds innovation. When your engineers aren't spending every waking moment replacing blown up production lines, they get to actually do research and development. They get to refine processes, experiment with new techniques, and push manufacturing sophistication forward. Phaeton has had the luxury of time, and time is the one resource no other Forge world on this list can afford. It's the privileged child of the Mechanicus, and honestly, good for them. Somebody has to not be on fire. But if you think being safe means being interesting, wait until you hear about a Forge world that has the exact opposite problem. Agrippina doesn't just face danger, it's literally scarred by it. Agrippina, they call it the Orb of a Million Scars, and honestly, that might be the most earned nickname in the entire Imperium. Every inch of Agrippina's surface is covered in pipelines, factories, mines, and forge cities. Zero natural landscape left. The whole planet is one giant industrial scar. But Agrippina wasn't just building weapons for the sake of it. It had a singular, defining purpose. It was Cadia's supplier. For thousands of years, Agrippina pumped out staggering quantities of military material and funneled it straight to the defenders of the Cadian Gate. Tanks, munitions, replacement parts, everything the soldiers standing between the Imperium and the Eye of Terror needed to keep fighting. Agrippina built it, Cadia used it. That was the arrangement. The two worlds existed in a grim symbiosis, one holding the line, the other making sure the line had something to hold with. Then Cadia fell, and Agrippina didn't just lose a trading partner, it lost its shield and its reason for existing in the same moment. The 13th Black Crusade saw Agrippina come under devastating assault, and with Cadia gone, there was nothing standing between the Forge world and the full attention of chaos. Which is, not ideal. But here's the thing, centuries of proximity to the Eye of Terror had turned Agrippina's defenders into some of the toughest defensive fighters in the Imperium. And when the Cadian survivors, scattered and homeless after their world cracked apart, needed somewhere to rally, Agrippina became that place. They didn't just find shelter. They found a new front line. Dispersed Cadian forces threw themselves into the defense alongside the Forge world's own warriors, and together they held, barely, bloodily, but they held. There's something genuinely moving about that. The people who built the weapons and the people who used them, fighting side by side on a planet named after its wounds. But if Agrippina earned its scars through defiance, the next Forge world earned its reputation through sheer stubbornness in the face of something entirely different. Graia. If you've played the Space Marine video game, you already know this place. And if you haven't, just picture a factory the size of a continent that builds nothing but Warlord-class Titans, which are basically skyscraper-sized war gods with cathedral cannons strapped to their arms. That's the Manufactorum on Graia, a Forge world nicknamed the Crown of Miracles. Now here's where it gets fun. Over 1 million orcs, led by Warboss Grimskull, invaded Graia with one goal: steal the Warlord-class Titans being built inside the Manufactorum. 1 million greenskins swarming a Titan factory. That's not an invasion, that's a heist movie directed by a lunatic. But it gets worse. The legendary Titan Invictus was sitting inside the Manufactorum during the attack. This thing is basically a holy relic with legs and enough firepower to level a city. Losing it would have been a catastrophic blow to the entire Imperium. So the stakes weren't just defend the factory. The stakes were, if you lose this, the Imperium's military capability takes a hit it might never recover from. The Administratum agreed. They graded Graia as one of the Imperium's most important strategic locations, which meant extraordinary military resources got thrown at its defense. And those resources came in the form of the 203rd Cadian Shock Troopers and the 2nd Company of the Ultramarines, led by none other than Captain Titus. Yes, that Captain Titus, the one you played as. The guy who solves every problem by hitting it harder. Titus and the Cadians held the line against 1 million orcs, defended the Invictus, and kept the Manufactorum from falling into greenskin hands. A full liberation fleet eventually arrived to finish the job, but the real work was already done. Graia survived because a handful of soldiers decided that losing a Titan factory simply wasn't an option. But if you think Graia's defenses are impressive, wait until you see a Forge world that doesn't even need a surface to build on. Lucius. Most Forge worlds are impressive. Giant industrial planets covered in factories and cathedrals dedicated to building weapons of war. That's the baseline. Lucius looked at that that baseline and said, what if we were hollow, had a fake sun inside us, and could teleport titans? Because that's exactly what Lucius is. The entire planet is hollow. The population doesn't live on the surface. They live on the interior, looking inward at an artificial sun that the Mechanicus constructed at the planet's core. It's essentially a Dyson sphere turned inside out. Every detail about this place sounds like it belongs in a different, more ambitious franchise, but no, it's just another Tuesday for the Adeptus Mechanicus. But the architecture isn't even the real flex. The real flex is the teleportorium technology. Lucius guards spatial displacement systems completely unmatched anywhere else in the Imperium. We're not talking about teleporting a squad of soldiers across a room. We're talking about teleporting titans, full god machines, relocated through space and dropped onto a battlefield like someone placing a chess piece. Other Forge worlds build the biggest guns in the galaxy. Lucius can put those guns anywhere it wants. On the production side, Lucius covers basically everything. Infantry weapons, battle tanks, battle titans of the Collegia Titanica. The Lucius pattern laser gun in particular has become one of the most widely recognized weapon patterns throughout the Imperium, which is, not a small claim for something that isn't Mars. And on the tabletop, their teleportarium abilities let Adeptus Mechanicus units deploy from deep strike reserves. You keep your fragile damage dealers safe off the board, then drop them exactly where they need to be with perfect positioning. That kind of tactical flexibility is a big reason anyone picks Lucius over other Forge worlds. A hollow planet with a star inside it that can teleport god machines across a war zone. Sometimes the Mechanicus really earns the Tech Priest title, but if Lucius pushes the boundaries of what the Mechanicus is supposed to do with Imperial technology, wait until you hear about a Forge world that started studying technology it was never supposed to touch. Stygies 8. Remember the Vanquisher cannon? That absurdly powerful anti-tank weapon that Tigris pioneered and Gryphon 4 helped produce? Well, Tigris got overrun by orcs. Gryphon 4 got eaten by Tyranids, which means Stygies 8 is now the sole known producer of Vanquisher cannons in the entire Imperium. Every single one. No pressure. But honestly, the Vanquisher monopoly isn't even the most interesting thing about this place. Stygies 8, known as the ever-staring Cyclops, sits on the 7th and largest moon of its planetary system. It's classified as production grade 2 extremis, with a tithe grade of aptus non, meaning it pays 0 tithes because its output is too strategically valuable to skim from. The Forge cities here produce gun barrels, recoil dampeners, and propellant chemicals that are second only to Mars in quality. So on paper, this is a loyal, indispensable manufacturing powerhouse. Great, wonderful. Here's where it gets complicated. The tech priests of Stygies 8 are actively, deliberately, and enthusiastically pursuing forbidden Xenos technology. Studying alien tech isn't just frowned upon, it's one of the worst things a tech priest can do. And Stygies 8 doesn't just dabble. They wage entire wars against alien species specifically to capture and study their technology. Hey, nice gun. Mind if we take that apart? Actually doesn't matter if you mind. And when their armies march into battle, they deploy stealth screening projectors and target befuddling apparatuses that are suspiciously Xenos in origin, equipment that Stygies 8 officially denies owning, while using it every single battle. I don't know what to tell you. To signal loyalty to Mars, they wear long pitch black robes of endless night accented with Mars crimson, which is a nice gesture, but it's a bit like robbing a bank while wearing an I Love the Police t-shirt. Their loyalty to the Imperium itself isn't really in question. It's their loyalty to Mechanicus doctrine that's the problem. They're heretics by every technical definition, but heretics who happen to be indispensable. And when you're the only Forge world producing Vanquisher cannons, people tend to look the other way. But if Stygies 8 bends the rules with alien tech, the next Forge world on our list bends the laws of physics with plasma. Ruse. Every Forge world we've covered so far has its thing, its specialty, its claim to fame. Riza looked at plasma technology, the most unstable, dangerous, catastrophically volatile weapon system in the entire Imperium, and said more. And they weren't kidding. Known as the furnace of shackled stars, Riza is considered second only to Mars in both production volume and technological sophistication. That's not a participation trophy. That's the silver medal in a galaxy of thousands of industrial worlds. The Lehman Russ Executioner and Stormblade super heavy tanks roll off Riza's production lines, both of them running on plasma systems that would make engineers on lesser Forge worlds break out in a cold sweat. But the real stars of Riza are the Titans. Legio Crucius, the warmongers, call this world home. and their doctrine is basically push everything to the absolute limit and then push harder. Their god machines mount the biggest, nastiest, most power-draining weapons available to the Collegia Titanica. Weapons that other Titan legions won't touch because the reactor strain alone could cause a catastrophic meltdown. The warmongers don't care. They push reactors to the edge of safe parameters to move faster, hit harder, and overwhelm anything standing in front of them, which is, not ideal for the reactor's long-term health. Here's the thing about Ryza's plasma obsession. It inspires both envy and genuine suspicion, even on Mars. Where other tech priests see unstable peril and unacceptable risk, the priesthood of Ryza sees the purest incarnation of the Omnissiah, the energy of stars bound in chains and hurled upon the enemies of humanity. That's not paraphrasing. That is literally how they describe their work. Hardest line in the entire setting. Ryza has weathered threats across the millennia, but the late 41st millennium hasn't been kind. Orc warriors have plunged the world into brutal war, forcing massive resource reallocation from manufacturing into defense. The furnace of shackled stars is still burning, but it's burning on two fronts now. And even plasma mastery has its limits when you're fighting for survival. But Ryza, for all its power, still answers to one world. The world that every Forge world answers to. Mars. Every Forge world we've talked about in this video exists because of this one. Every single one. Mars isn't just the first Forge world, it's the Forge world. The headquarters and principal manufacturing center of the entire Adeptus Mechanicus, sitting right there in the Sol system next to Terra itself. And its importance isn't subtle. The two-headed Imperial Aquila, the symbol of the entire Imperium, has one head representing Terra and the other representing Mars. That's the short list. Two planets matter more than everything else in human civilization, and Mars is one of them. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Mars wasn't always a rust-colored industrial hellscape. It was once fully terraformed. A breathable atmosphere, surface water, green, livable land comparable to ancient Terra. But constant warfare during the Age of Strife and relentless industrialization completely destroyed the manufactured atmosphere, stripping the planet back to its primordial desert state. They literally unterraformed an entire planet through sheer industry and violence, which is, not ideal. Today, the only inhabitable regions are massive enclosed forge cities. The largest, Olympus Mons, houses some of the most productive manufacturing facilities in the entire Imperium, and the Fabricator General rules over all of it with absolute authority. No committees, no votes, one person, one planet, total control. But here's where it gets genuinely wild. Numerous worlds across the galaxy have been deliberately terraformed as replicas of Mars, not inspired by Mars. Replicas. That's not industrial planning. That's religious devotion so intense it reshapes planets. And then there's the dirty secret at the heart of everything. Mars possesses a vast number of standard template construct designs, more than virtually anywhere else in Imperial hands. Ostensibly, they hold these to build better technology for humanity, but the reality is painfully obvious. They're hoarding it. Every STC fragment locked away on Mars is another piece of leverage, ensuring nobody can challenge the Mechanicus monopoly on technological knowledge. It's not preservation, it's control. Mars is the birthplace of the cult Mechanicus, the holiest celestial body in the galaxy to its followers, and the spiritual, political, and industrial center of everything the Mechanicus does. It's not just a factory, it's a religion, a government, and the second most important planet in all of human civilization. Every Forge world we've covered is just an echo of this one. And without its beating heart, the Imperium goes dark. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.